The Auchenai were not originally a part of the Draenei Council of Exarchs on Draenor, instead being formed later on from the Sha'tari order. Originally, the Sha'tari under Exarch Ophar were charged with studying the remains of the Naru Dore, who had died when the Draenei crash-landed on Draenor in order to possibly discover a way to contact the other Naru. Eventually, however, the Draenei Maladar discovered that Dore's void-corrupted remains, much like the Naru Kure and Oshu'gun, began attracting the spirits of the Draenei dead. As a result, the large mausoleum of Auchenai was constructed around Dore's tomb, and the Auchenai were formed in order to safeguard the dead, with Maladar appointed as their exarch on the Council of Exarchs. It's worth noting that a quest in Teron'gor Forest has you fighting the resurrected, quote, first Exarch of the Crypts, preceding Maladar, though this character has not appeared or been mentioned anywhere else. Eventually, however, after the Orcs' war against the Draenei and the collapse of their civilization, the remaining Auchenai, out of madness or desperation, deviated from their original charge and turned to Necromancy. Eventually, a force from the Orcish Shadow Council was sent by Gul'dan to Auchenai and accidentally summoned the entity Murmur, an enormously powerful elemental of sound, which destroyed the entire complex and the surrounding area. There are, however, two versions of this story, the first supported by older sources and some of the newer ones, while some, but not all, of the newer sources support the second version. According to the first version, the Orcs' incursion took place while the Horde was invading Azeroth, but before Doomhammer slaughtered the Shadow Council, while the second version states that it took place about 2 to 3 years before the opening of the Dark Portal, just after the destruction of Sha'tar City. The first version states that the Orcs came under the leadership of Vorpal and Blackheart to investigate Auchenai and attempt to harness its energies, while the Draenei at the site hid themselves in its catacombs, while the second one states that the Orcs were led by Teron'gor in order to destroy the Draenei who had taken refuge there from Sha'tar City. Murmur was either accidentally summoned while the Orcs were researching the site, or as an act of desperation when they faced imminent defeat from the Draenei. And after the destruction of the mausoleum, the surviving Orcs either stayed, presumably to keep Murmur in check, and were forgotten about and presumed dead by the rest of the Horde, while the remaining Draenei continued to hide, or they defeated and enslaved the Draenei and left only a small force in order to restrain Murmur. In addition to their normal priest abilities, the Auchenai had the ability to summon the spirits of their fallen kin using the light, who, if they were willing, could then fight alongside them. Over time, however, the Auchenai turned from their original charge and began practicing void magic as well as necromancy. Now, instead of very rarely using the light to summon the willing spirits of the dead on rare and extremely important occasions, the Auchenai began actively resurrecting the corpses in Auchenai and the Bone Wastes, as well as torturing and binding the spirits of the dead Draenei. Interestingly enough, the corrupted Auchenai now can clearly see and interact with the spirits of the dead, while before they had to ingest a special potion to do so, although Exarch Maladar in Worlds of Draenor states that he can, quote, hear the souls of the dead and that they, quote, speak to those who listen, end quote. Interestingly enough, while the majority of the sources clearly say that the Auchenai are living Draenei necromancers, the Dungeon Journal in World of Warcraft states that Maladar is the sole surviving Auchenai, while all the others are undead that he has reanimated. Also worth noting, the observer Shirak the Dead Watcher, found in the Auchenai crypts, is actually an undead construct made by Maladar and not an actual demon. During the events of Beyond the Dark Portal, Ner'zhul and his entourage had left Hellfire Citadel in order to travel to the Black Temple and perform the ritual that would eventually shatter Draenor. They were, however, tracked down by the Alliance expedition in Teron'gor Forest under the leadership of the Naft Trollbane and were forced to take refuge in the ruins of Auchenai, where they discovered and were joined by the Shadow Council Cabal led by Vorpal and Blackheart. The Alliance followed them into the ruins with the aid of the Arakoa Grizzak, who the World of Warcraft Chronicle implies was one of the founders of the Sepik in Auchenai, while in the original novel he was just a grave robber. Regardless, as the Alliance entered the site, the Auchenai priest Nemuran stopped them and demanded an explanation for their intrusion. Eventually the Draenei agreed to help them against the orcs by summoning an army of Draenei spirits, although he refused to disclose where the other Auchenai were hiding in the complex. The Alliance and the Draenei were victorious in the battle, slaying Kilrog Deadeye. However, Ner'zhul escaped to the Black Temple and the Cabal fled back into their side of the ruins, presumably. The Nav Trollbay invited Nemuran and his kin to join the Alliance, but the Draenei refused, stating that their Auchenai duties forced them to remain in Auchenai. It's interesting to note that Nemuran used the light, not the void, during these events, implying that the corruption of the Auchenai took place after the destruction of Draenor. One month before Illidan's Storm Mage's defeat at the Black Temple, the Demon Hunter traveled to Auchenai alongside a contingent of Shadowmoon clan fell orc bodyguards. He intended to use an artifact, known as a soul casket, in order to siphon the souls of the Draenei dead and later use their energy to power a portal to Argus, much like he had previously done to open a portal to Nafreza, the Dreadlord homeworld. As the group entered the catacombs, however, they were attacked by the Auchenai and their undead army. Since Illidan was completely focused on the siphoning ritual and could not defend himself at all, he had to rely on his bodyguards to protect him until he was finished. The Auchenai, however, realized what the Demon Hunter was doing and promptly bombarded him with their shadow spells while their undead slaughtered the fell orcs. Illidan, severely wounded, was just barely able to complete the ritual and teleport himself back to the Black Temple before collapsing. The wounds the Demon Hunter suffered that day were so grave that he was left greatly weakened when the Sha'tar assaulted the Black Temple weeks later, which arguably caused his defeat.